Good morning, dear ones. Welcome to our YouTube channel that seeks during this time to bring just a little thought that will bring encouragement and hope and blessing to you in these days. We just are trusting that as you pause during your day, perhaps even to have a cup of coffee, then you will just find this a little blessing and a little encouragement. We won't keep you long, just a couple of minutes with some thoughts and observations that will build you and bless you. We are trusting. One of the common phrases we've heard during these days, very much so, is we're in uncharted waters. We're in uncharted waters. And while that is true, these are unknown days. A pandemic to this degree has never spread so rapidly and quite so quickly in our modern society. But that phrase is an ancient one. It comes from the days when map making was in its infancy and the maps were being drawn up of the newly explored world, and people wanted to put down on paper the places and wonderful new sites that they were discovering and leave traces so that people could follow in their path. And so cartography was in its infancy during the days when those words were beginning to be bounded about. Uncharted waters, waters that had not really been explored. Many of those early map makers for these unexplored territories would use either a visual symbol or the written word to describe them. They would either draw dragons in those unexplored places, or they would use the phrase, "Here be dragons," or "There be dragons," because there was a fear of the unknown. These uncharted waters were fearful, and there was some trepidation and some fear over what exactly was there. They'd never been explored. And so, just to build a sense of this newness, this unawareness, they would use those phrases, except one famous mariner, Sir John Franklin, who was the master mariner for King Henry V of England. If he had a map that crossed his desk that had those inscriptions, "Here be dragons," or some would use even "Here be demons," he would take his quill pen and he would scratch those phrases out and write instead, "Here be God. Here be God." What a wonderful phrase of reassurance, because he didn't want faith to be lost for his mariners. He wanted to dispel the fear. He wanted to build the faith. And so he put that sense of God is everywhere, all the time, in every place. God is there in the midst. And he didn't want his mariners, therefore, to be frightened or to be afraid, but he wanted them to have trust in a God who was everywhere, all of the time, all powerful, all conquering, all victorious. Here be God was the phrase that he loved to use and inscribe on his maps. And I think for all of us, as we face these uncharted waters of the coronavirus pandemic, we need to remember that is a solid truth that Sir John Franklin reminds us of. Everywhere, all the time, God is present. God rules. God reigns. God has not abandoned us or left us to fend for ourselves, but God is sovereign and he's still very much on the throne. I love the words that Moses used when the Israelites were facing uncertain times of fleeing Egypt, and they were finding themselves afraid and vulnerable to quite know what was happening. But he used very reassuring words, and they're to be found in the book of Exodus, chapter 15, verse 18. He says, "The Lord shall reign forever and forever." That sense of God is always and will always be in charge. He is sovereign and he's on the throne. The writer to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament uses a similar thought. He says, he sustains, talking of God, he sustains all things by his mighty word and the power of his command. He sustains all things, the universe, the world, our entire society. He sustains all things. God is in charge. God is sovereign. God rules and reigns. We needn't be fearful in these days because God ultimately is still in charge. Yes, there is much that is unknown. There are uncharted waters, undoubtedly. But the fact is this: God is in charge. Here be God. Know that truth, dear one, whatever situations and circumstances you personally are experiencing during this pandemic. This is a solid truth. Here be God. Let me close with a couple of verses as well, just to encourage you, I trust, and just to bless you. Isaiah 26, verse 3. Lovely reassurance. You will be kept in perfect peace, all who trust in you, and whose thoughts are fixed on you. Fix your thoughts on him, not the dragons, not the demons that are scary in these uncharted waters, but as Sir John Franklin would have said too, fix your thoughts on God, because here be God. And I like to, as Moses, we just mentioned him, was passing and the mantle of his leadership was being passed on to Joshua. God gives these very assuring words as well in Joshua 1:9. Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I'm sure those words were very true for John Franklin as well, as he tried to build up and encourage his mariners and his sailors and his fledgling navy in those days. God is with you wherever you go. And so for you too, dear one, God is with you during this time. Here be God. God bless you. We'll see you next time.